begin with? Is this like killing anyone's eardrums, the level I'm talking at? Okay. I can usually project pretty far normally. Well, hi, how's everyone doing this morning? Good. Do I have any pet owners in here? Oh, I have an empathetic audience. Fantastic. Glad to hear it. How many of you have, just in your work, in your field, encountered any of your clients that have pets? Okay, a pretty large amount of you. Good. Well, I'm here today to talk about the role that pets play in the family, why they're so important, and how we can kind of redefine animal abuse as family violence. Not only to protect the animals, but to protect the families as well. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of history about spcaLA. We started out in 1877. It stands for the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals of Los Angeles. Back in the late 1800s, we actually came about to protect horses. Horses were being overworked and killed regularly. And so we started protecting horses. That was it. That was our main focus. And then before Child and Family Services came around, we actually had a branch called spcC, which was also to take care of children. So it was a Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. Obviously, these organizations came up. They took on the child role and doing the human end of things. And spcaLA continued to take care of animals. We predominantly take care of cats and dogs, but I've seen an 18-foot python, goats, turkeys, horses, you name it. We probably had an armadillo that came in on a truck from Texas once. So there's really nothing that surprises us anymore. I've actually been at the spcaLA for 10 years now. And in that time, I've been running the education department. Our education department focuses very, very specifically on empathy development. We run programs throughout the community working with youth. So and those of you who are sort of involved in some youth programs. We have programs known as TLC, which is Teaching, Loving, Compassion, and a program known as jTLC, which is a mini TLC. These programs focus on working with kids from at-risk communities, partnering them up with shelter dogs, and really trying to instill that level of empathy that a lot of our students are missing. And they're not missing it, they just haven't had the opportunity to practice it. And a lot of them have been involved in domestic violence in their home, child abuse, etc., etc. And so that's predominantly what we do, is go out and work with these students. We also work, like I said, jTLC is a program for juvenile offenders. It's actually mandated by the courts in Los Angeles for anyone under 18 who has committed animal abuse. We also work with the JOIN program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the JOIN program here in Long Beach. For juvenile offenders, first-time offenders. So we also, jTLC started as animal abuse offender program and kind of changed to protecting and working with the kids who also bullying, assault, because all, as you know, all these forms of violence are very interconnected. Okay, so get ahead of myself sometimes. A few of the other things we do at spcaLA. I heard somebody say they have a couple of dogs from our Long Beach location. LA, really? Yes, it was a while ago. That was a bit ago. We do shelters, so we have adoptions. We do medical care. We have behavior and training classes for our shelter animals, also for the public. So if you guys do have dogs you want to bring in, we have a ton of different classes, agility and fun nose work and advanced tricks, actually. We have public services as well, boarding facility, grooming facility. We do retail operations. If you do purchase any food from our retail store, it's my only plug for the night. All of the proceeds do go back to benefit the shelter animals. So it's here local in Long Beach. We have animal protection services, which basically, I know APS is what we call it. Most of you would probably know that as adult protection services. But animal protection services in our world. If you've ever seen animal cops, that's what they are. They go out and they investigate cruelty, and you're actually going to hear of some of the cases that we've discovered throughout the years. And again, humane education, which is important. Here's our locations. We do have an administrative building up in the LA area, which used to be a shelter and it closed down many years ago. We have a shelter in Hawthorne, and we have another one local here in Long Beach that's actually not far from here at all. All right. So before I start talking about all the interconnectedness of violence, I want to talk a little bit about the role of pets in the U.S. How do people view pets in the United States? Well, according to the American Veterinary Medical Association, we see that 98% of animals that people have are seen as either companion animals or family members. The law might identify animals as being property, but the people who own the animals do not. There's a very, very small percentage of people who see animals as property. The AVMA also found that more homes in the United States have pets and have children. True in my house. The pet industry is actually the 7th largest industry in the United States. More money is spent on pet food than baby food. And the very, very sad and unfortunate fact is that children are more likely to grow up with a pet than with a father. Unfortunate. So if we look at who's taking care of all of these animals that are in homes, we found that about 72% of the pets have primary caretakers who are women. Also found that in homes with children, that like 64% of homes with children who are under 6 have pets, and then about 75% of homes with children over 6 also have pets. So what does that mean? As you know, violence doesn't discriminate. It happens everywhere, with anyone, at any time. So it would stand to reason that if our animals are such an intricate part of families' lives and people's lives, that they themselves are affected by the violence that happens in the home. So one of the things that I think is funny is that for a long time, animal welfare has kind of been seen as like, okay, you've got the crazy animal people over here, and all the human welfare people over here, right? And these crazy animal people, I don't want to deal with them. It's an unfortunate stigma that a lot of the animal welfare world has kind of accumulated over the years. And because of that, violence against animals has traditionally been disregarded or ignored as being nearly as important as violence towards humans. But, as I said before, animals are an integral part of the family. They are obviously affected directly or indirectly by the violence that happens in farms. So a lot of studies have shown that there is what this is called the link. It was developed by Phil Arco and Frank Cassione in the mid-90s. If any of you are interested in the topic that I'm talking about, I would highly recommend looking up either one of those authors. They have a plethora of research done in this field and still do, and they're just really interesting reads. So what this suggests is that all forms of violence are highly interconnected. They just recently added elder abuse from some of the studies that they did. But animal cruelty, child abuse, domestic violence, elder abuse, if one is happening, the likelihood is, and you guys, I mean, you all know that you work in this field, if one is happening, there's a really good chance that the other one is happening. All right, so what they found, as an example of this, is that children exposed to domestic violence are 3 times more likely to be cruel to animals than children who have not been exposed to domestic violence. We also found that children who are cruel to animals are 5 times more likely to become violent offenders, and that 88% of families reported for child abuse also had animal abuse in their home. That is a huge number, 88%. So to give you an example of this, do any of you remember the DC snipers? I love when I'm talking to adults. Usually I'm teaching to kids, and they're like, we don't know, that was a long time ago, we weren't born yet. Did you have a question? Oh, I thought I just remembered. Okay. All right, so DC sniper, and you know there were some attacks that went on. It was like 3 to 4 weeks back in the early 2000s. Killed 10 people, critically injured 3. When he was a kid, his mother, so he had this cat that he loved. He loved, it was his best friend. When that cat would get on, his mother was very, very abusive. The cat would jump on the bed, and she felt that the cat would dirty the sheets. So she blamed him for the sheets being dirty, and every time the cat jumped on the bed, So of course this association with cats becomes very negative, grows up in a home with violence. He goes out to take out his aggression and his frustrations by stalking local cats and killing them with slingshots. Now, if you can imagine what the DC sniper would look like while he was stalking and killing humans, it's a very, very similar pattern in which Lee Malvo practiced. It came out of a violent home. He practiced with animals, became desensitized at a very young age, which made it a lot easier to then stalk and kill humans in the future. All right, this is Gary Ridgway, Green River Killer. Anyone? Yes. All right, so he murdered, what they know of is 49 women. There's a good chance it's actually closer to 75 or 80. It's just those are the ones,
probably higher.
Or higher. Those are the ones that leak, basically. He was arrested in 2001. He grew up in, again, an incredibly abusive home. A lot of domestic violence going on. His mother was incredibly abusive to him as well. And so what he started doing was going out, taking that frustration out, killing small animals, mutilating other animals, put a family cat in like a little mini refrigerator out in the woods and let it suffocate in there and die. Again, practicing these behaviors, making it easier for him to be violent towards humans in the future. Sorry, that's very, we need to depress all the first thing in the morning. These guys, these are very interesting to me. These are the Lures. They're in North Carolina in 2011. Basically, neighbors called about complaints of dead animals being along the side of the house. Started to smell, and they're just dead bodies laying there, basically. The police went to investigate that and found that there were 4 children living in the home that nobody ever knew about. No one knew they were born. They'd never been allowed to go to school. They basically were prisoners in their own home. Living in filth, kind of imagine a hoarding situation. And what this is a really, really important aspect of this as well, which is that animal abuse, when reported, often leads to findings of child abuse or domestic violence going on in the home. Animal abuse tends to be something people don't hide as readily, right? If there's violence going on towards your spouse or towards your child, you're not going to necessarily do that out in the open. Animal abuse, because a lot of people don't regard it as so important, you'll have abusers who treat these animals very poorly in public, throw dead carcasses off to the side, beat their dogs in public. And so reporting animal abuse is incredibly important, not just for the animal, but for identifying the violence going on in the home as well. And all of our APS officers are cross-reporters. So if they come in and they see any kind of kids in the house or suspect any other sort of violence, they have to report it. All right, so basically about 1 million animals every year are killed in connection with domestic violence. And 74% of pet-owning female domestic violence survivors have reported that their animals have been threatened, injured, or killed by the abuser. We actually do surveys with the clients we work with, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But in our specific surveys, we found that 64% of our clients have had the abuser in their home with their animal. So we found a pretty similar statistic. It's another example. This is Sean Michael Rose. He has a 6-year history of domestic violence against his girlfriend and his girlfriend's mother. His girlfriend tried to leave, and he didn't want that to happen. So he took her 2 dogs, threw one of them to a group of trees, and actually this is Otis right up there. Yay, he survived. He did break both his legs and was sent into pretty severe shock. The other dog had his back broken and was thrown into the street and was unfortunately run over by a car. But this was all in conjunction with him not wanting his wife to leave, or his girlfriend to leave, saying, I will do this to you if you leave me. And so often animals who are in these situations, if clients do leave, or as a domestic violence survivor does want to leave, these animals are used as coercive tactics to either get them to come back or to get them to stay. So when a large amount of domestic violence survivors were polled, they felt that animal abuse is one or more violent episode in a long history of indiscriminate violence aimed at them and their vulnerability. And I think I just said that, but basically animal abusers do use their animals to control their spouses. This is actually, I think it's our last one, so I won't depress you too much more. But this is actually a local case. It just happened in 2013 that our officers did investigate and, yes, got a conviction. There's a couple, Terrence and his girlfriend Chelsea. They went out on the town. It's like 4 in the morning. They've been drinking. He's incredibly abusive, a history of abuse. She decides to go somewhere with her friends. In the span of a couple hours, he sends her like 400 texts, like, get home, I'm gonna kill your dog, you have to get home. And so what he did is he took Busy, I think she was 10 years old, so 10-year-old American Eskimo dog, and threw Busy out of a 5th-story window, where he then went downstairs, videotaped it, I mean, thank goodness, it's kind of easy to get a conviction when you have it on the videotape, but he threw Busy out of the window, went downstairs, brought Busy back upstairs, filmed him poking Busy's wounds, saying, look what I did to your dog, and you better get home or I'm going to kill Busy. Unfortunately, Busy did not make it. The video is one of the hardest videos I had to watch. I did see the neurological damage that Busy sustained. It was just too much. Maybe if she'd been younger, she would have been okay. The good news is that the laws are changing and they're starting to keep up with our beliefs of it. This is one of the first convictions where he was actually sentenced to go to state prison, not just 16 months in county jail. Yeah. All right, so as I had mentioned before, this is why cross reporting is such an important part of what we do. I said this before, but animal abuse by children is one of the earliest warning signs of future violent behavior and/or conduct disorder. So one of the things that we've seen a lot is you might have a child that, say, tortures a mouse, like our Columbine kids did. They tortured said mice on fire, and the response to that was, boys will be boys. It's not that bad. It's a mouse. How big of a deal is that? It's just a mouse. Except that it indicates signs of almost definitely future violence, and they continue to grow in size. So it went from a mouse to a cat to a dog to a human. So identifying that saves, hopefully, on most future lives, but also that person who is suffering. If a child is hurting an animal on that level, something is going on in your home. All right, so do you have any questions so far?
So I just wonder about the age of the child, because I have dogs and I have like sometimes younger kids, hope dogs is still the
Absolutely. Yep.
So I think that probably should be done.
Absolutely, and that's a really good point. You know, there's an exploratory age in kids, right, where they don't necessarily understand, and it's part of that is they are learning empathy and learning to understand how to interact with the world and the living things around them. There's a difference between a child pulling a dog's tail, what happens here when I do this, versus a child intentionally killing, maiming, setting something on fire, and then getting joy out of it. If you're talking to your child and saying, you know, this pulling a dog's tail is not okay, especially if they're 2, 3 years old, I mean, this is I'm sure I probably have some child development people in here, but that's normal. It's definitely normal. So I wouldn't be worried if you have kids at home and somebody pulls your dog's ears. Don't think your child's a serial killer. For the record. But if that kind of behavior continues on into an age where they do know better and continue to enjoy it, there is something else going on there. All right. So we have a program because of this connection. We have a program that we call Animal Safety Net. And Animal Safety Net basically provides a temporary home for the pets of domestic violence survivors. It really gives our clients the opportunity to get out of their dangerous situations. We house their pets for free for them. We have a lot of clients who have refused to leave, and this probably is in here somewhere, but I get ahead of myself sometimes. We have a lot of clients who have lived in their car for months and months and months, and I'm sure many of you have seen this as well. Lived in their car for months and months and months just because they will not leave their animals behind. We had a client once that stayed with us, or she was living in her car for 6 months with 2 teenagers, a black lab, and a very large chihuahua. By the time the dogs got to us, they were covered in fleas, covered in dirt, ear infections, and it wasn't because they didn't care about their dogs. It's obviously a resource issue, right? And they're all living in a car together. But you can imagine the situation that those children are in as well. And she would have continued to live in her car with her pets to escape this abuser, but not be able to go into a domestic violence shelter. And part of the reason was that those are her kids' dogs. And psychologically, very often, kids do identify with their pets. So leaving those pets behind in a dangerous situation, often in young kids' heads, they say, well, I'm next. I'm the one who's getting left next. The next time the going gets tough, I'm getting left behind. And so a lot of parents, on some subconscious level, really understand that, and they don't want to separate their children from their pets. All right, so to come into our ASN program, you'd have to have a pet. You'd think that that's self-explanatory. I have had people ask if I can take their children too. I cannot. That's not what we do. Crating children is illegal. You're not allowed to do that. Very bad. They have to be entering. The clients have to be entering into a domestic violence shelter or some sort of advocacy program. What we really want to encourage is people getting help, not just going, as many of you know, I'm sure, not just going to, Aunt Sally's house and hanging out for a couple of weeks and then ultimately going back. We really want to encourage people to get the appropriate help, and we do so by saying you need to be going into some sort of domestic violence shelter. And I've seen it numerous times work. I've had many, many clients call, I tell them about the program, they say, no, I'm not going into a shelter, and then they realize there's not a whole lot of other options for them. And often Aunt Sally then says, well, I don't want your 7 cats. You can't bring them here. And so they do end up coming into our program. It just takes a little while for them to sink in. We do ask that we confirm with an advocate as well, just to be assured that they are going into a program. So we have a hotline, and as you guys are done for the day, when you do filter out, there are brochures over on the table over there for ASN, and the hotline number is on there. Usually we ask that advocates call the hotline, but it's okay. We have clients that call too. At this point, I've been doing this for 10 years now. I have a lot of clients who have actually told other clients about the program, so I get phone calls from them. Unfortunately, so one caveat is that at the moment we can only answer it Monday through Friday. So it gets to be a little tough. I haven't missed out on too many clients over the weekends. I've been trying to keep track, and if it's really having a negative effect on the program, and it hasn't been thus far. I wish I had a 24-hour hotline. It's just not set up to do that. As anyone in nonprofit knows, it's always an issue of funding. So usually once somebody does call our hotline, it takes about 30 minutes to get a call back. A lot of times it's even faster than that. Once they come to us, they do have to sign a contract, and that contract is basically good for 6 weeks. That's what we start. And the reason we start with a 6-week contract is because it gives the owners an opportunity to really decide whether or not having an animal come back to them is what they want. I know most people, these are family pets, they love them, they want their animals to come back to them. There are situations where a woman has 5 kids, 3 dogs, 4 cats, and it's just too much to get back on their feet. And so it really, that first 6 weeks gives them that opportunity to really establish themselves again. We can always do extensions, and it's always on a case-by-case basis. If the contract kind of comes and goes and I don't hear from the client, we can't find them, we do consider the animal relinquished to the SPCA, and that's where we have to do what's in the best interest for the animal. Can't just assume they're under contract forever. They also have to sign a medical release. Our program does spay and neuter, update all vaccines. We give a microchip. We also do any other kind of medical care that's needed. I've had a cat that basically needed the equivalent of a colostomy bag. We did that. We had a cat that was diagnosed with diabetes, got them on insulin, sent that insulin home, whatever we could with the owner when the owner picked the cat up. So we spend a lot of money and time really making sure that these animals are healthy. A lot of these animals that come into ASN, they have not necessarily had the most nutritious life. They've lived a very tumultuous life, high levels of stress, which we all know what that can do to one's body. And so we try really hard to make sure that we keep them medically sound and fix any problems that they might have so we can send them home even healthier than when they came to us. So how do they get to us? This is always, often, I should say not always, often a complicated issue. Ideally, we love if the client can bring the pet to us. That would be the best case scenario. In reality, it doesn't always happen. So we've done it in numerous amount of ways. Our animal protection services can go out and pick animals up. We go out and pick animals up. The client brings them to us, a friend or parents of the client. The police, I've had police bring the animals to a local animal control. We had someone up in Santa Clarita, which is very far from Long Beach. And animal control was nice enough to house that animal for us until we could get up there the next day. And so we do try to, any way that we possibly can. What I will say is we won't go to a house where the abuser still is. I'm not going to knock on someone's door and say, hey, can I take your dog? So when we do go out, it's usually into like a parking lot, somewhere in a local store, just somewhere familiar for them. It's easy for the client to get to. I will say, any of those of you who work at a domestic violence shelter, on our end, we love it. I know that your shelters can't take animals, but it really, really is very, very helpful for us and for the client if they can show up there with their dog and you can house a dog for a couple of hours until we can get there. Actually, you guys just recently went and did that. And they were nice enough to house a Chihuahua for us temporarily until we could get there. That keeps everybody really safe, but I understand that insurance and liability doesn't always allow that. So, when they do come to us, we have a numerous amount of options for them. One of the options is that we do keep them at the shelter. We try really hard to foster our animals out into the foster community. If any of you are interested in being foster parents, I lied, I have 2 plugs apparently. If any of you are interested in being foster parents, we can always use that. But at the animal shelter, we have a training and behavior department. Every dog that comes into our shelter becomes a project dog. So our training and behavior department works with them, gives them basic obedience, works on any problems they might have. Most of the dogs that come in have some level of fear towards men, or just people who have a large presence in general. And because of that are often aggressive based out of fear, not because these dogs are actually aggressive. And so our training department spends a lot of time working with them. We have, like I said, a medical department. We have hundreds of volunteers. All of our, if you're kind of imagining an animal shelter and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're in a cage for 6 weeks, not actually the case. And even our kennels are all indoor-outdoor access. They're heated on the inside. And so they do have a very nice facility to stay in. And our volunteers get them out all the time. And this is honestly usually one of the biggest concerns for clients. My dog's going to be in a kennel for 6 weeks. I can't have that. And so it's really important that they understand that we have specific volunteers in a training department, and these animals are out. Often they just hang out in my office with me most of the time. Like I said, we try to send them to foster homes. All of our foster parents do go through a screening of sorts. Depending on the level of the domestic violence case, sometimes, like for example, let me just give you a good example. We had a woman come into our shelter. She had 2 Pekingese, and she had tried to leave numerous times. The abuser had locked her dogs in the basement, starved them, said, standard stuff, I'm going to kill your dog, she has to come back. So she found our program and decided to come. This man stalked outside of our shelter, sat in the car. She gave us pictures. She had a restraining order against him and with the animals on it. But it didn't matter. He came in, he made up story after story. Oh, my sister, she brought her dog. My sister asked her to pick up her dogs. They're like 2 white Pekingese. Do you have those here? I mean, just constantly, like just weeks and weeks, right, of hanging out outside. He had friends that he sent to hang out outside of the shelter. So at this point, we would have never fostered out those dogs to a new foster parent. I've been way too suspicious. Why is this person coming here right now fostering these dogs? So we're very cognizant of that. What we ended up doing is kind of like witness protection. It's really cool. It's like this covert operation, right? We're like a fenced-in area on the back, and we had like a pickup truck with a cab on the back, and the dogs went in there and sat in crates, and no one saw. And then the home that the dogs actually went to had a 6-foot fence around it, so the dogs never actually had to be walked down the street either. They could still have outdoor access, but the public wouldn't see them. And so it sounds really intense, but so are these people that are looking for these animals. They can get incredibly dangerous. All right, so we have a couple of rules as well for clients. One is they aren't allowed to visit their pets, and that is because, well, there's 2 reasons. One, confidentiality is huge for us. So if these animals are in foster care, there's no way the foster parents and the clients are going to be able to meet. Second is it's incredibly stressful on the animal. See, your owner comes and then they leave, and they come and then they leave. So we do try to keep them in contact, so that we send pictures, they can call me anytime. Once they're a client, they have my cell phone. They can call anytime, send emails, pictures, updates, etc., etc. And they're always able to pick their animals up early if they need to. They just have to give us a couple days' notice. All right, so this right here is an example of our intakes. And I just, really the main point of this chart, it's really important to me, is as you can see, there's kind of a lull in like 2008, 2009. Right around there is when I started going out, doing talks, promoting this, presenting it. Before that, we were actually kind of at a standstill again because of funding. We had lost some, but we gained more. And I was able to start doing more talks, be more visible in the community. And because of that, our intakes have gone up and up and up and been on a steady incline. And I just think it's really important for whatever all of you learn here today too, is to take that back to your facilities, take that back to your community, take that back to your organization. And hopefully this number will continue to go up. And I only say that, I don't mean domestic violence should go up. I mean that I really hope we can make this program available to anyone that has animals in their home. We still see it. 10 years of doing this program, and we still see people who have no idea. And there's such a high turnover rate at a lot of shelters as well, as I'm sure you all know. And so sometimes this information about this program gets lost. So we actually do call, like about 3 times a year, every shelter that we have on our master list to remind them that this free program exists. Good. Thank you. Also, to let you know, because this is the happy part of it, obviously the objective of our program is to keep that family unit together in the end of all of this. And so it does get broken up temporarily, but our goal is to make sure that these animals get back to their families, get back to their owners. And since 2004, we're looking at about a 75% return rate, which to me is a really, really great number. It is such a sad experience to watch somebody be ripped away from their pet. And I'll tell you, 6 weeks later, 3 months later, when that reunion happens, and not just on the human's end, on the animal's end as well, the level of joy that happens it's incredible. And you know that what you've done in this program makes a really big impact on people's lives. And 75% of returned animals, to me, that says we are making an impact. About 18% have been relinquished and adopted. We have had, unfortunately, about 5% that have had to be euthanized. Since I've been there, the ones we have had to euthanize have all been medical issues. So sometimes, I mean, recently we had, a 16-year-old cat. They can only live so long, unfortunately, and sometimes there are medical issues we can't treat. Owners are always contacted first before we do that. We talk them through it, and then in that exception, they're always allowed to come visit their animal and be with them when the euthanasia happens. And actually, I've never, of the euthanasias we've had to do, I've never had a client that has said, no, you shouldn't. It's always been at a point where it just made sense for the animal. There are, about 2% of the time, we have a couple animals that they just don't kennel well. So they're highly adoptable, but putting them in adoptions, some animals just don't do well in a kennel situation, so we foster them out or send them to a different rescue that can really focus in on that animal's very specific needs. So a couple of ASN testimonials, because I can tell you that this program works, but I think what's really most important is what our clients feel about this program. So one is, thanks for what you do for the pets of battered people. He would have starved them if I left the dogs with him, and of course I couldn't have that happen, so I never would have left. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I miss the girls terribly and cannot wait to be reunited with them. In such an ugly situation, it is a silver lining and it keeps me strong. We cannot thank you enough for such kindness and true humane gestures. I am forever thankful to your institution and the foster parents for our dogs' care. When we picked them up, we knew how well they had been taken care of. Their love and the light in their eyes were as when we used to live together peacefully. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Okay. I know I had mentioned earlier that I have, we do surveys, which is where a lot of that information came from as well. But we did find in our surveys recently that 100% of the clients rated the ASN program a 5 out of 5. 100% of the clients said that knowing their pets were safe made it easier for them emotionally. And 64% would not have gone into a DV shelter had they not been able to place their animals in animal safety net. All right, so what can you guys do? Ask. This one, it's big. Ask. Not everyone knows that there is a place for their animals to go. And there are so many situations that I've had clients call and say, I didn't know, and I had to leave. I had to leave my dog behind, and I don't know what to do. Please, when your clients come to you, ask them. If they're not on your intake forms, get that question on your intake forms. And even if it's not, ask them anyway. I have a lot of pet lovers in here, so I probably don't need to say this, but even if you're not a pet person, please recognize how important pets are to the families that you're dealing with. A prime example is one time we actually took a beta fish into our ASN program. Now it's kind of hard to imagine how a beta fish was going to be abused and used as a coercive tactic, right? It wasn't about that. It was that there was a 5-year-old son that loved this fish. And this fish was so important to him that housing this fish, which actually sat on my boss's desk for a few weeks, because she loved it. But it was just so important to him that this happened. And so please, and I know I'm talking to a group of very empathic people, but really try not to judge in situations like that. We also take any animal. In a crisis situation, a dog and a cat, or a rabbit, those we can take in a hot second. If we have a horse, it doesn't mean we can't take a horse. It doesn't mean we can't take a farm animal. What that means is I just need a couple of days to find an available resource for them, because I can't just house a horse in a dog kennel. But as I was actually telling Veronica earlier, we had like an 8-foot python that came in with no cage. What do you do with that? Well, I have friends in the reptile rescue world, and they took him for me. Sounds weird, but that's the thing, right? But basically, don't be discouraged if someone comes to you and tells you, I have a beta fish, we need to save it. Please don't laugh, please don't judge. It is really important to them. All right, also report animal abuse. As I mentioned before, if you see it in your community, and please just educate people about this, reporting animal abuse is not just about saving the animal, although we're all animal lovers, so it's an important component, but it's not the end of it. It's also saving the lives of kids in those homes, of a spouse in that home. Really, really important to report animal abuse. And actually, if you go to spcaLA.com, you can report animal abuse right online, anonymously from the computer. It's also, you can call 888, oh, it's right there, I have to remember this, 540 spcaLA, and that's our anonymous tip line for our animal cops. Also, I mentioned before, you can become a long-term foster parent, or if you know anyone who's interested, or maybe would really like to have a pet but can't commit full-time to a pet. A lot of our ASN animals, they're not puppies or kittens, they're older animals, and what they need is a quiet, very stable place to just honestly sleep it off. Most of them come in and they have, our dogs and cats that have come in, they're like this. They haven't slept in weeks and weeks, especially if they've been bouncing around from hotel to hotel or they've been in this violent situation. Honestly, if they get into a nice foster home, they just sleep. And it's really good for them and they come back a lot healthier. Again, all the stuff that I mentioned before, really important to redefine animal abuse as family violence. Animal welfare is a human welfare concern. And it just, in the decade that I've been doing this, I've seen it transition a bit, but it can transition more. We are not just an animal welfare organization that hangs out over here with a bunch of crazy animal people. That's not what we do. Our mission statement is based on education, law enforcement, advocacy, helping the community, making the world a kinder, more compassionate place. And so redefining that, educating people about that, it's not just about being an animal lover, it's about understanding how animal violence affects our community. And again, like I had mentioned, please educate others about the cycle of violence. Some resources, just in case you're interested. Like I said, our APS department, that's the number. I think you should have this all in your the Latham Foundation is just full of a lot of really good information about this, as well as the National Link Coalition. The National Link Coalition is run by Phil Arco, as the guy I mentioned before, but you can sign up for a free newsletter, and his newsletter basically just encompasses all of the things across the country that have happened regarding the cycle of violence, including animal abuse. So issues of domestic violence, new laws that have come about, and so I highly recommend it. It's free. Sign up for it. It'll come to you.
Do you guys have specific catchment area?
Do we have specific what?
Catchment area, like Orange County?
For our clients?
Well, I'm thinking more for the reporting. So
you know what though?
Animal, I'm like, no, but it's like other things.
LA County, but our jurisdiction is the state of California. For the officers, it's the state of California. They have really great connections with other departments, and to be honest, there are some police departments that do their investigations really well in animal cruelty, and then others that still need to keep up with the times, I think. And so our officers are really good at if they can't do it, redirecting those cases to where they need to go. And I should say for ASN, we don't really have a limit either. We work with Dubs out in Big Bear. I've picked up animals from out there before. Riverside, Ojai, San Diego. So if there are clients and we can find a way to get those animals to us, we will take them. It's just really important to me that we help as many people as we can in this situation, because we're really the only of its kind in this area. So we reach as far as we need to. I'm sure you probably know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Animals are allowed to be included on restraining orders now. That happened a couple of years ago. Some people know, some don't. But in a case of domestic violence, even though the law still sees animals as property, in cases of domestic violence, they are allowed to be on the restraining order. Which is a start. Progress. I think that is it. Do you guys have any questions? Please, I love questions. Yes.
Thank you very, very much. I'm just wondering, how have you integrated the animal welfare, family welfare? How have you integrated that in screening for family violence?
In screening.
In other words, I can imagine, for instance, we work for our purposes. I think it's a wonderful way to identify the family violence by talking about animals in the home, particularly with kids.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you've had experience where you're seeing now that that's part of the screening process is talking about, in terms of risk assessments, talking about animals.
It's becoming more and more prevalent in conversation, and I think it still has a long way to go. I think, honestly, what ultimately happens is people who are animal lovers talk about this, and the people who aren't, it's harder to get them on board with it, which is why it is so important about kind of identifying this connection that animal welfare is a human welfare concern. I don't do a lot of risk assessment myself, but I know that like the advocates that I work with regularly, they incorporate this often. But it really is, I think, again, just a matter of just continuing to talk about it, to talk about these problems and these issues so that people are aware of them and can incorporate it into all of their risk assessments. That makes sense? Yeah, no problem. Yes?
Just like there's classes to end abuse of people, I assume, I'm hoping the answer is yes, and you can refer animal abusers who like don't want to do it, but they grew up in it, that you have training classes for people to stop abusing animals?
Not at the moment. I'm hoping we get there at some point. I do have it for youth. So, like I said, our jTLC program, if we have anyone who has committed an act of animal cruelty, most of our kids, it's very rare that I'm going to get a sociopath as part of one of those kids. It's usually because they come from a violent home, right? And so those kids, we do have programs for. They get referred to by the courts or through JOIN. Unfortunately, at the moment, there isn't really an adult class. Right, exactly. It gets mandated sometimes when people get arrested for animal abuse and they're told they have to go to a class, but there's not actually one that really exists at this point. I think it becomes part of like anger management classes, conflict resolution, that kind of stuff, but as a separate class, not yet for adults. I wish. We'll get there. Any other questions? Yes?
You have a statistic that says that 88% of families reported for child abuse also had abused animals in their home. Mm-hmm. What about the looking at it from the other angle? For instance, if you see an abused animal, what's the percentage that also has a child abuse? Is there a stat on that?
Not that I've found yet. And I think that that's probably because people they're not always looking at it from that direction, right? So not that I know of yet. Hopefully they'll find one soon.
Mandated reporters, animal control officers are mandated. I always kind of wondered how that worked. Do they do an investigation? Do you know how that works when they go into, do they actually do a child abuse investigation? What do they do?
So animal control or our officers were to go in, they see children in the home, they report it to Child Family Services, and as far as the animal control officers are concerned, they don't do much else with that at all.
Since I run the county's child protection hotline,
Yay!
I'm here because I was really interested in hearing. And to report child abuse, you have to have a reasonable suspicion of child abuse. Mm-hmm. So that in and of itself, that an animal is being abused will raise any suspicion, a suspicion. But there needs to be some preliminary questions, not investigation, but clarifying impact questions on the impact to the child. Mm-hmm. Okay, we see your dog has been hit. Has Johnny been hit too?
Right.
What's the impact of the dog being hit on this child? And if you can show the impact of the child, then my evaluators are able to accept that report. But if you call in and say, at this address, this dog is being abused, we'll give you the animal protection number because it's animal abuse. And you've got to realize, I get upwards of 20,000 phone calls per month. 8,000 to 10,000 families are investigated per month. Taking on animal abuse would take us into another realm that we aren't funded for, we don't have expertise for. So we need to partner with you and develop a relationship. And I can tell you, all my intake evaluators have your 800 number because it's really similar to ours. You're 540 SPCA, we're 540 4000. So it's not too much. So I will go back and inform my staff of this presentation. Expect that we might have an uptick in animal abuse reports from this area of the county, but we will refer you back to the appropriate area.
Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I always kind of assume that to some degree. I mean, you can only our officers can't necessarily prove child abuse, but they still do report it, and they call it in, and they're mandated reporters.
Report child neglect. You can report child
Yeah,
neglect.
and a lot of times that's happened too. A lot of the cases will end up being hoarding, which I would assume, right? If the child's living in a horrific environment that they have to go out, like in feces and.
Yeah. If it's a filthy home,
Right,
yes.
right.
If it's a dirty home, no.
Of
There's
course,
a difference
yeah, no,
between,
like
you
dead
know,
animals,
hoarding
feces.
that's clean and hoarding where you've got environmental issues that
Right.
affects
Yeah.
the health and safety.
Yeah, well, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. Hopefully, we can just collaborate and save the world. What do you think? Oh, I'm sorry.
What access do the officers have to get inside of them? Like what
They don't.
authority?
They don't.
So they have to be allowed into the
Our officers can't just go and bang down a door because you have an issue of property. So if the animal is on site and that, say the abuser was like, that's my dog, they have no authority to say, no, it's not, and just take the dog from the home. So if our officers go out, it's usually just a matter of accompanying us because it maybe is a dangerous environment. But again, they meet at like a parking lot, or they don't go into would be a good home.
So if there's an anonymous call at some time.
Are you talking for ASN or are you talking for?
No, I'm talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry, for investigations for animal abuse. They go survey the situation, they can walk right up. So what happens is if they get a call for animal cruelty, they can go right up to the house, they can check it out, they can ask to see things. If they feel like there is just like imminent danger for an animal, they can absolutely, they do have right to pull from that situation. There's what's called a post-seizure hearing that happens after the fact. And so what happens is then that person who has had their animal removed has, will make 14 days, I believe, to come in and have a post-seizure hearing to identify whether or not the officer made a good judgment, just to protect their rights, of course. But we've had, and there's been numerous cases like that. For example, I can give you one of our most recent and severe ones. We had a call about a dog being abused. Our officers went out. There are 2 dogs in the home. They look lovely. They look healthy. No problem. They tell our officers, yeah, he's right here. And so one of our officers, just peeking around, sees a doghouse in the back and boarded up. Says, no, it's not okay. I'm going in. Found a dog boarded up inside the doghouse that had its skull bashed in and was still alive. She basically had treatable mange, and they didn't want to foot the bill for the medical costs to fix it, so they cracked her in the skull and locked her in them. At that point, they removed that dog and the other dogs. In the end, they're not allowed to hold the dogs that were healthy. I mean, that's the way the court case kind of ultimately works out. But our other dog was treated, the one that was abused was treated and saved and is in a good home, and that's a happy ending. But they can go in and take an animal if they have to.
So just to clarify, if they see a dog in the yard or something, they can access that, but if there's a dog inside the house, they can't go into the house.
If it's imminent danger, they can go into. So if they were to walk in and someone was like inside the house beating their dog with a lead pipe in front of them, which has happened, then mostly because that person didn't know it was wrong, they can pull that animal. Yes, absolutely. Again, like I said, there has to be a post-seizure hearing to make sure, or there's basically like the equivalent of a judge that sits in and makes sure that that was a valid pull, so that our officers can't just go around and randomly pluck animals from homes. But yeah, they can go in as long as it's imminent danger. So, otherwise, they have to go and get a warrant.
What do you think, Tim? Do you wish we had the same laws? I think it's so interesting that people who investigate child abuse are social workers in plain clothes and their own cars, and people who investigate animal abuse have guns and police cars and uniforms, and the power to go in wherever they need to go in. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting, actually. You're right. So none of your social workers would go in uniform, would they?
No, but gun or anything.
I mean, they go in
Right.
there, but still, it's just very.